Caitlin Sullivan's parents' place. Also on a sister who lived in Toms River, New Jersey, and a brother who was a dentist in Ridgewood. I had some hope again. Maybe we could close this case after all and bring down the butcher. Maybe I'd see him again and take a little bow myself. Chapter 106.
Michael Sullivan had been using the name Michael Morrissey since he'd been living in Massachusetts. Morrissey being a punk he'd more or less drawn and quartered in his early days as a hitman. Caitlin and the boys kept their first names, but went under the surname Morrissey now too. The story they had learned by heart was that they had been living in Dublin for the past few years, where their father was a consultant to several Irish companies with business connections to America. Now he was doing consultant work in Boston. The latter part happened to be true, since the butcher had just gotten a job through an old contact in South Boston. A job, a hit, a murder for hire. He left the house overlooking the Hoosick River that morning at a very civilized 9 o'clock. Then he drove west. He was headed to the Massachusetts Turnpike in his new Lexus. He had his work tools in the trunk. Guns, a butcher saw, a nail gun. He didn't play any music on the first part of the trip, preferring to travel down memory lane instead. Lately, he'd been thinking a lot about his early kills, about his father, of course, a couple of jobs for Maggione Sr., and a Catholic priest named Francis X. Conley. Father Frank X. had been messing around with boys in the parish for years. The rumors were all around the neighborhood, the stories laced with plenty of kinky, slimy detail. Sullivan couldn't believe that some of the parents knew what was going on and hadn't stepped up to do something to stop it. When he was 19 and already working for Maggione, he happened to spot the priest down at the docks, where Conley kept a little outboard for his fishing trips. Sometimes he would take one of the altar boys for an afternoon. A reward. A little sweet treat. On this particular day in the spring, the good father had come down to the dock to prepare his boat for the season. He was working over the engine when Sullivan and Jimmy Hatz stepped on board. "Hey, Father Frankie," Jimmy said, and beamed a crooked smile. "How about we take a little boat trip today? Do some fishing." The priest squinted up at the two young hoods, frowning when he recognized who it was. "I don't think so, boys. Boat's not ready for action yet." That brought a laugh from Hatz, who repeated, "Ready for action? Yeah, I get you." Then Sullivan stepped forward. "Yeah, it is ready, Father. We're going on a sea cruise. You know that song, Frankie Ford's Sea Cruise? That's where we're going. Just the three of us." So they cruised on out of the boatyard, and Father Frank X. was never seen or heard from again. "God rest his immoral soul in hell," Jimmy Hatz joked on the way back. And that morning, as he drove out on his latest job, Sullivan remembered the old Frankie Ford song, and he remembered how the pathetic priest had begged for his life, and then for his death, before he got cut up into shark food. But most of all, he remembered wondering whether he had just done a good deed with Father Frank, and whether or not it was possible that he could. Could he do anything good in his life? Or was he just all bad?
Chapter 107.
He finally arrived in Stockbridge, near the Massachusetts-New York border, and used his GPS to find the right house. He was ready to do his worst, to be the butcher again, to earn his day's wage. To hell with good deeds and good thoughts, whatever they were supposed to prove. He located the house, which was very country, and he thought very tasteful. It sat on a tranquil pond in the middle of acres of maples and elms and pines. A black Porsche Targa was parked like a modern sculpture in the driveway. The butcher had been told that a 41-year-old woman named Melinda Steiner was at the house, but that she drove a spiffy red Mercedes convertible. So who belonged to the black Porsche? Sullivan parked off the main road behind a copse of pines, and he watched the house for about 20 minutes. One of the things he noticed was that the garage door was closed, and maybe there was a fine red Mercedes convertible in the garage. So once again, who belonged to the black Porsche? Careful to stay under the cover of thick branches, he put a pair of German binoculars to his eyes. Then he slowly scanned the east and south windows of the house, each and every one of them. No one seemed to be in the kitchen, which was all darkened windows, no one moving about, or in the living room either, which was also dark and looked deserted. But somebody was in the house, right? He finally found them in a corner bedroom on the second floor, probably the master suite. Melinda, or Mel, Steiner was up there. And some blonde dude, probably in his early 40s, presumably the owner of the Porsche. Too many mistakes to calculate, he was thinking to himself. A real clusterfuck of errors. What he could also calculate was that his $75,000 fee for this job had just doubled, because he never did two for the price of one. The butcher started to walk toward the country house, gun in one hand, toolbox in the other, and he was feeling pretty good about this job, this day, this life he had for himself.
Chapter 108.
There was very little in life that could beat the feeling of having confidence in your ability to do a job well. Michael Sullivan was thinking about the truth in that statement as he neared the house. He was conscious of the amount of land surrounding the white colonial house, 3 or 4 acres of secluded woods and fields. Off in the back he saw a tennis court that looked like green clay. Maybe it was Har-Tru, which the tennis buffs back in Maryland seemed to favor. But mostly he was focused on his work, on the job to be done, on its 2 working parts. Kill someone named Melinda Steiner and her lover, since he was definitely in the way now. Don't get killed yourself. No mistakes. He slowly opened the wooden front door of the house, which wasn't locked. People did that a lot out in the country, didn't they? Mistake. And he was pretty sure he wasn't going to get much resistance once he got upstairs either. Still, you never know. So don't get cocky, don't get sloppy. Don't get overly cute, Mikey. He remembered the fiasco in Venice, Italy, what had happened there, the mess, and how he could have gotten tagged. La Cosa Nostra would be looking all over for him now, and one day they'd find him. So why not today? Why not right here? His contact for the job was an old friend, but the mob could have easily gotten to him, and then set the butcher up. He just didn't think so. Not today. The front door hadn't been locked. They would have locked it, especially if this was a trap and they wanted it to look good. The couple he'd spotted in the bedroom had looked too natural, too much in the moment, and he didn't believe anybody, except maybe himself, was slick enough to create that kind of setup and honey trap. That couple was upstairs humping their brains and vital fluids out. There was very little doubt about it in his mind. As he climbed the front stairs, he could hear the pleasing sounds of their screwing drifting down to him, bed springs coiling and releasing, the headboard hitting the bedroom wall. Of course, it could be a recording. But the butcher doubted it, and his instincts were usually very, very good. They had certainly kept him alive so far, and they'd made a lot of other people dead.
Chapter 109.
As he reached the second floor, his heart was beating a lot faster. The moans and assorted bed noises had gotten louder, and he started to smile in spite of himself. Peculiar thought. He was remembering a scene in this movie called Sideways that had completely cracked him up at the time. The shorter character, who was basically a drunk, had to retrieve the other schmuck's wallet, and he needed to sneak into a bedroom where a couple of tubby lowlifes were rutting like pigs in a trough. The scene was pretty great. Hilarious, totally unexpected, too. Just like this was going to be. For him, anyway. So he turned a corner and peered into the bedroom, and he thought to himself, "Surprise, you're both dead." The man and woman were in pretty good shape, well-toned and athletic, nice tight asses. Kind of sexy together. smiles on their faces. They seemed to like each other, which made it good for them. Maybe they were in love. They definitely appeared to like the sex, which was a good, sweaty workout. The blonde guy was going deep, and Melinda seemed to like it that way just fine. The whole thing was kind of a turn-on. Melinda had on white knee socks, which Sullivan got a kick out of. Did she do it for him or for herself, he wondered. After a minute or so of watching, he cleared his throat. Ahem. Order in the fuck room. The coupling couple jumped apart, which was no easy trick given the corkscrew position they'd been locked in a couple of milliseconds before. Wow! You too, he said, and smiled pleasantly, as if he was here doing a survey of extramarital affairs or something. Really going at it? I'm impressed. He kind of liked the two of them, actually, especially this Mel. No doubt about it, she was a looker for her age. Nice body and face. Sweet face, he was thinking. He even liked the way she didn't cover up and stared right back at him like, what the hell do you think you're doing here? This is my house, my affair, none of your goddamn business, whoever the hell you are, so get lost. You're Melinda Steiner, right? He asked, pointing the gun at her, but not in a threatening way. What was the point of threats, of scaring them any worse than he had to? He didn't have it in for these two. They weren't the mafia. They hadn't come gunning for him or his family. Yes, I'm Melinda Steiner. Who are you? What do you want here? She was definitely kind of feisty, but not being totally obnoxious about it. Hell, this was her house, and she had a right to know what he was doing here. He took a few quick strides into the room, and pop, pop. He shot the blonde male in the throat and forehead, and he dropped off the bed into the Indian-style area rug on the floor. So much for keeping in good shape so that you live longer. Melinda put both hands to her mouth and gasped out loud. Oh, my God! But she didn't scream, which meant this was mostly about the sex. They were screwing, but the two of them weren't in love, not even close. Watching her face now, he didn't even think she liked Blondie all that much. Good girl, Melinda. You're thinking on your feet. He didn't feel a thing. No pain, I promise. He was my architect, she said, then quickly added. I don't know why I told you that. You're just nervous. Who wouldn't be? You've probably already figured out that I'm here to kill you, not your former lover. He was standing about 3 feet from the woman, and his gun was pointed in the general direction of her heart. She seemed in pretty good control of herself, though, very impressive to him. Sullivan's kind of girl. Maybe she should be the head of the mob. Maybe he would put her name up for the job. He definitely liked her, and he had the sudden thought that he didn't much like her husband. He sat down on the bed with the gun still on her. Well, on her left tit, actually. Mel, here's the thing. Your husband sent me here to kill you. He paid $75,000, he said. I'm improvising here, but do you have access to your own money? Maybe we could work out some kind of a deal. Is that an option? Yes, she said. It is. That was all. A deal was struck a couple of minutes later, and his fee quadrupled. A lot of crazy people out there in the world. No wonder Desperate Housewives was so popular, he couldn't help thinking.
Chapter 110. Sampson and I hadn't been to Massachusetts in a few years, not since we'd chased a madman killer named Mr. Smith in a case codenamed Cat and Mouse. Mr. Smith had probably been the most cunning of all the psychopaths we had tracked to that point. He almost murdered me, so not a lot of happy memories for us as we rode in Sampson's car from D.C. toward the Berkshires. On the way, we stopped off for an out-of-this-world dinner and some congenial bullshit at my cousin Jimmy Parker's restaurant, the Red Hat, in Irvington, New York. Good. Otherwise, this trip was all business. We went alone, with no backup. I still wasn't sure what I planned to do if I found the butcher. If we found him. If he hadn't already fled. We listened to some old Lauryn Hill and Erykah Badu tapes on the road and didn't discuss Michael Sullivan much. Not until we reached the end of the Connecticut Turnpike